Boa tarde a todos e todas, bem-vindos ao nosso canal UFSC Internacional. Hoje nós temos um workshop muito especial. A todos e todas, bem-vindos ao nosso canal UFSC Internacional. Hoje nós temos um workshop muito especial. A todos e todas.
Oi.
Olá, acredito que estava dando alguma interferência, então vou reiniciar. Boa tarde a todas e todos. Eu sou Fernanda Leal, diretora de Relações Internacionais da Universidade Federal de Santa Catarina. E hoje nós temos aqui um webinário da Sinter com o título Studying Abroad in the United States. Esse webinário será realizado pelo professor Daniel Chaves, que é o nosso English Language Fellow. Ele foi designado pelo Regional English Language Office da Embaixada dos Estados Unidos no Brasil para atuar na UFSC em 2025. Este é um programa que tem por objetivo aprimorar o ensino e aprendizagem da língua inglesa para fortalecer as conexões entre universidades brasileiras e estadunidenses, possibilitar que professores estadunidenses de língua inglesa tenham uma experiência internacional e melhorar a comunicação entre educadores, oficiais de governo e profissionais da indústria dos dois países. O Daniel, nosso English Language Fellow, ele é vinculado à Secretaria de Relações Internacionais da UFSC e atualmente ele está oferecendo alguns cursos de extensão para a nossa comunidade universitária e também para a comunidade universitária da Universidade do Estado de Santa Catarina. São os cursos Academic English Writing, Academic English Communication e English for Study Abroad, que é aberto para estudantes de graduação, pós-graduação, técnico-administrativos e professores da UFSC. Esses cursos, muito provavelmente, também serão oferecidos no segundo semestre. No mais, nós temos um workshop previsto, além deste webinário, que vai acontecer no dia 13 de junho, com o tema de Research Abstract Writing Workshop. Então, eu vou passar a palavra para o Daniel, que a partir de agora vai conversar com vocês sobre este webinário de hoje. E caso vocês tenham comentários, dúvidas, vocês podem incluir no chat que o Daniel vai poder responder ao final. Daniel, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Are we able to share what I have on my screen right now through the... Oh, there we go. Great, thank you. Okay, hello and welcome everyone. So as Fernanda was saying, my name is Daniel Chavez. I'm an English language fellow here at UFSC, working with Sinter and the Regional English Language Office. So to start, a short introduction about myself. I'm from the United States, from Washington, D.C. originally. And about my higher education career. I got my undergraduate degree at Brandeis University. And while I was there, I had the opportunity myself to study abroad through the Fulbright U.S. student program. I went and got my completed a year of a master's program at the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. And later in my career, as I transitioned into my current job of teaching, I studied my master's degree in English language teaching at Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland. I'm now serving in my second year as an English fellow here in Brazil. Currently, my primary duties, as Fernanda mentioned, I'm teaching 4 courses here at UFSC: Academic English Writing, Academic English Speaking, a focus on presentation, English for Study Abroad, and I'm also running an English Conversation Club, which is still open to anyone who wants to have an opportunity to practice their spoken English. My role here at UFSC is in promoting internationalization and English language education in general. And to that end, I'm going to be talking with you all today about opportunities for studying abroad in the United States. So I'm going to start with some general context, talking about reasons for studying abroad, the differences between the US and Brazilian education systems, and some of the basics that you will be coming into if you're studying abroad in the US. I'll go through different types of study programs, both degree granting and short-term exchange. I'll talk about funding, the costs and opportunities, and about the process of applying and beginning your study abroad experience overseas. So, to begin, with some background and context. Obviously, those of you who are watching this are probably already interested in studying in the United States, but there's a lot of great reasons to do so. Universities in the United States, many of them have a global reputation for the excellence in academic excellence and the wide range of opportunities they offer. And it could also be of a personal benefit to you. Studying abroad is a great way to be exposed to new ideas, to conduct and find different research opportunities, and to get to know people and things about your chosen career and your chosen field of studies. It's also very popular. In the United States, as of 2024, there were over 16,000 Brazilian students in the United States. It's one of the top 10 countries for sending higher ed students to the United States, and the third largest for intensive English students. We're not just going to talk about study abroad in universities, but all the ways, including language study and other exchanges that can lead to you studying in the United States. But first, some background about the educational context. So, a big difference between the United States and Brazil is that the United States has a very decentralized education system. Public education at all levels is controlled by local states and cities, but there are a lot of commonalities in these public systems in different areas in the United States. American school students progress through elementary and middle or junior high through high school in 13 years of education. The school year runs on a different calendar. It begins varying but around August and September and continues through May or June, with the summer break happening between June and August. Some other interesting and distinct features about public education in the United States is that, first of all, there's a grade point average that is weighted on a scale of 0 to 4. So students coming into American universities will be judged on their academic merit based on their scale of a number and the grade point average. It's common for students to take electives throughout their secondary school in particular. Those are courses that are not part of the regular K-12 curriculum, but they expand the offerings. I myself took courses in philosophy and comparative religion in my secondary school, not required for graduation, but something that exposed me to new ideas. There's also extracurriculars, clubs and activities that students take in middle and secondary school can be a major part of their academic career. I'll talk more about that when we talk about what's required to get into the universities, but extracurricular activities can be a big part of how you present yourself to universities. They define your interests and show your capabilities at leadership and your participation. The testing system in the United States is also independent of the federal and education system. There's certain tests that are commonly taken, such as the ACT or the SAT and the SAT subject tests, but they're not part of a single organization that's mandating it for every secondary school and for every university. Instead, they're private nonprofit organizations that put forth these academic tests. They cover a wide range of fields, and students are taking these standardized tests as early as 7th or 8th grade or middle school. So they're a big part of what it means to study in public education in the United States, and what a lot of American college students will have completed before they move on to higher education. I'm going to talk today about colleges and universities, and I'll probably use the terms interchangeably a lot, but there are some differences between the two. The main one is that colleges in the United States, just like universities, are a form of higher education, but they're an undergraduate-only institution. In fact, you'll often see the word college applied to institutions that are part of a larger university, such as the College of Arts and Sciences or the College of Education. Whereas a university offers undergraduate and postgraduate degrees, so a much wider range of topics. Universities are also distinguished by the fact that they commonly conduct research, whereas colleges may have more limited opportunities for research, and they often will have a more specialized curriculum. You'll find that certain, especially smaller and private colleges in the United States may have a specialized curriculum. They may be known for their excellence in physics or in the arts or in any number of sub-subjects, whereas a university will often have a much wider range of opportunities and subjects to study. Colleges are typically, but not always, smaller, and as they are smaller, they will have a more defined community. You'll have a better chance of, depending on the actual college, but it has a very distinct feel between the two very often. Another difference to understand in the United States is the distinction between private and public universities. Public universities, again, not run at the federal level, are controlled by the states. which is why you'll probably have heard about University of California or the State University of New York. Public universities are funded by state taxes, and they're primarily, the big difference that distinguishes them from private universities is that they offer lower costs to US citizens who are residents of the state. They're often much larger and have a more diverse student body because they recruit from a wide range of communities all over their state. Private universities, on the other hand, are often but not always smaller. You do see some larger private universities. I believe there's a private university in New York that's something along the lines of 60 or 70,000 students, but the average size is more around 5 to 6,000, with below 5,000 considered small for a private university, and a larger university, anything between 5 and 10 is common for private universities. Private universities are also distinguished by their larger endowment. That is, since they don't have tax funding, they rely on donations and savings. And this endowment, or their private source of funding, means that while they don't have the kind of public state-supported research that public universities do, they don't get grants from the government always or as many grants to conduct research projects. They do have more independent funding they can use to spend on their facilities, their extracurricular options, and crucially, for financial aid. So even though private universities can be more expensive, they may also have more opportunities for scholarships and other ways to help students who want to study there and need to seek out sources of support. So, university education or higher education is common in the United States. A majority, about 60%, have at least some amount of college education. Although it's not required, it's common among many people in the US. I have it here broken out by different types of degrees: bachelor's, associates, and master's. And I'm going to go through right now and talk about them. But I wanted to first just give you some context, understand where American university students are coming from. So this all here is just a short overview over the types of educational opportunities that American students have and what they're typically looking for when they start moving into higher education. All right. So with that in mind, we're going to look through some of the types of study that may be available to you when coming to the United States. The first and most common one that you'll have heard of, and probably the thing you think of or that Americans think of when they talk about college or university, are undergraduate degrees. Those are typically either a 2 or a 4-year broad-based course. What that means is, unlike in many countries such as Brazil, when American students study an undergraduate degree, they typically don't choose before they enroll in the school what they're going to study. While an undergraduate degree at a 4-year university is going to be 8 semesters long normally, it's common for many universities to not require their students to declare a major until their 4th semester. This is because it has a philosophy of a liberal arts education. Universities and colleges in the United States seek to instill with their students a broad range of skills and knowledge with the goal of helping them develop their critical thinking, their communication skills, and to have some core components that they all learn from. However, undergraduate degrees are not always 8 semesters or 4 years. In fact, there's associate's degrees, which, as we saw, are not uncommon, which are 2 years. They are often vocational focused, and if you choose to study vocational study, you would probably be going on a different type of visa, which I'll talk about later. Associate's degrees are often granted by organizations such as community colleges, which offer an option to transfer to another university. So a 8-semester, 4-year liberal arts degree is common, but it's not the only way that students in the United States pursue higher education. What happens at the end of a course of studies, the students are either granted an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree. And a bachelor's degree is the 4-year program. The most common is probably the Bachelor of Arts or a BA, but there's other types of bachelor degrees that are possible, like a Bachelor of Science or a Bachelor of Fine Arts. It depends on the individual college or university, what they offer, and the exact terminology. But all of these are considered undergraduate degrees. So let's look here at master's degree. Unlike an undergraduate, a master's degree is a more specialized course of study. Most master's degrees will require you to have a bachelor's before you can enroll, although it doesn't have to be related. I had a Bachelor of Arts in drama, but I went on to get a master's degree in the field of education and applied linguistics. So every master's program will have their own expectations and their own requirements. However, if you're coming from abroad to pursue a master's degree, you're always going to need an F visa. Again, I'll talk more about the types of visas later. In the US, a master's degree is commonly 1 or 2 years. One is usually going to be a full-time degree could be completed in as little as a year, and a 1-year degree could take 2 years if it's done part-time, although there are also full-time 2-year master's programs. Generally, there's 2 types of master's degrees that are pursued in higher education in the US. First of all, there's the terminal degrees. That's things such as a Master of Business Administration, a Master of Fine Arts, a Master of Public Health. Those are the degrees that are meant to prepare you to do for a certain career. That's why they'll consist of coursework, taking classes, and also some kind of project or case study or field study or a thesis as a capstone. On the other hand, research degrees, especially the Master of Arts or the Master of Science, are often intended to prepare one either for a career, like a terminal degree, or to prepare one to go on to pursue further research, which is why they'll have coursework and very specifically a written thesis. My own degree was a little different. It was a Master of Philosophy, which is common in Europe, but not so much in the United States, although it's considered equivalent to a Master of Arts. And I had to complete a year of coursework and a written thesis or research project before I was awarded my master's degree. The last type of degree, and this is you'll get at an institution in the US, would be a doctoral degree. A doctoral degree is considered a terminal degree in either for some specific careers, such as consulting or data analytics or full-time research, or a terminal degree for people working in academia, faculty, professors, anyone working in a research lab. This is the kind of degree they're going to end at. It can take anywhere from 3 to 7 years is typical. Usually you'll have up to 2 full years of coursework, which may terminate in a master's degree. So you may get a master's degree as part of your course of study, but then you can take up to 5 years more for writing. That's at the far end. I personally know people who have completed it more in 2 to 3 years or 4 at most, but it's very possible that a PhD could take up to 7 years as a doctorate of philosophy. The good news is that a doctoral degree at a postmaster's level is often funded by research conducted at the university. If you remember, I was talking about universities conducting their own research, and they will often bring in doctoral students to work on their research projects and fund their studies in exchange. A doctoral degree will terminate when you complete your thesis, when you write the whole years-long project and present it. When you successfully defend your thesis, that's when you're awarded your doctoral degree. So, these are the types of full-time degrees, but there are other courses of study that can happen, both in degrees you're granted and in other forms of study. A separate type of postgraduate degree, neither a master's nor really a PhD, would be a professional degree. And that's a range of different ones, each with their own requirements. This is just a few examples of the kind of degrees you might get. When studying law, you'll often go to apply for a separate school, a law school, where you'll have 3 years of full-time study, followed by exams. Compare that to a business school, which is perhaps 2 years of study, and rather than requiring an academic career, requires work experience. And a medical degree, while also a type of graduate degree, is a whole different category. It can take 4 years just to finish your school and move on to your licensing and residency requirements, years more of work, but it's all considered part of the same career. Professional degrees will often require you to take a certain standardized test, like the GRE, the GMAT, the MCAT. In other words, when you're going on to do a postgraduate degree, it's going to depend a lot on the career you're going at, what they require, what they're looking for, and even the amount of time you'll be spending in your studies abroad. So, like I said, there's some other non-degree options to consider for studying abroad. One common one is a form of short-term exchange. This is a whole separate category from full-time studying, which is why it's under a different visa, the J visa. And that incorporates things such as a year or semester abroad, which is done on a university to university level, but also non-university programs, such as the Fulbright program or work internships. And there's also some specific initiatives and programs that are interesting that offer a way to study for a set amount of time without getting a full degree, like the Community College Initiative, where students are brought from overseas in order to study for a period of time at a community college, not to get a full degree, but to get an educational experience. And of course, there's also intensive language study. Like I said, very popular among Brazilians coming to the United States. It's a separate type of category, an F visa, and it just requires that you study English full time. You may have heard of other forms of study, of English language study when studying at a university. They often have what's called a pathway program or some other way where English language is incorporated into your university study, but it's also possible to study abroad in the United States on a visa only to take English classes. All right, so I'm going to share a short clip here from someone taught. This is done through another organization, the CIEE, the Committee on International Education, showing an example of a non-degree study abroad experience. This is a student talking about her experience in getting an internship that enabled her to work in the United States for a short amount of time. I'll play it here. All right. Are you able, you should be able to hear that, I hope so. Okay.
Hello, my name is Marie-Therese. I'm from Austria. We are here in Midtown, New York City office of Phosphate Therapeutics, where I am training for a total of 18 months. My job is to manage the supply chain of a small pharmaceutical company. Before first I moved here, I had no idea about CIE. I had no idea about the visa situation or any regulations. I was doing my bachelor's degree in biotechnology, so I was always very interested to work in the healthcare field. I just researched every single biotechnology or pharmaceutical firm in New York City. I basically just sent my resume to a lot of these companies I could find online, and I'm sure I sent over like 60 resumes. I stumbled across CIE, which is also represented in Austria. So I just went to the local office. Lady was extremely helpful. She walked me through the process, and it's actually pretty fast once you have found a position. Basically, you have all the support from CIE. They have a lot of experience. Just need to answer a couple of questions. Overall, it's been a very well organized experience. You always know from the very beginning what the timelines are. It really is tailored to your education, and they make sure it's the perfect fit, and the company actually has the capabilities to actually train you.
Okay, so we can see an example of a professional training program that's another form of study abroad that can happen in the United States. There's a lot of institutions out there. I'll share some of the ones I know at the end of this presentation that you could reach out to directly if these kind of programs are of interest to you. All right. So we've talked a little bit about the general nature of education in the United States, and I've mentioned something about why and what you could do when studying there. But a major thing to consider is the funding, both the sources of funding and the costs you'll be facing if you want to study in the United States. Now, I mentioned before that there's a difference between public and private education in terms of funding and costs. However, the costs for international students are generally going to be higher since there's not allowances made specifically for international students to benefit from public rates. These are some just based on my research, and there's a wide range of universities and possibilities. But if you're looking at a typical 4-year undergraduate degree, tuition alone at a public university could cost between $25,000 and $35,000 per year. So you're looking at between $100 and $140 for a 4-year, while a private can run anywhere from $30 to $55 would be typical. That is only covering the cost of tuition. There's other expenses that'll come along with that based on my research, and housing can vary widely. It's very common for American college students to look for on-campus housing in dormitories, but that's not the case for everyone. And some universities, especially those in large cities like in New York City, there's also universities that don't offer housing at all and just simply help their students find their own housing. But these ranges here just give an example of the kind of the broad range of costs you'd be looking at in paying rent while studying abroad in the United States. And of course, there's living expenses, which vary widely from state to state and from city to city, but this is showing some of the ranges. And lastly, most universities will require their students to all have health insurance, which is not done publicly, but often arranged privately, especially when coming from overseas. So these are some of the basic expenses you'll have to consider. This is showing some of the ranges. You can see how just looking at monthly housing rent for one person in one bed, it can range from anywhere from under $500 from some states in the Midwest and the Upper West to over $2,000 if you're in some of the large cities and some of the higher costs of living. So as you can see, there's a lot of range, but it's going to be an important part of your expenses and budgeting to consider. All of these costs are part of what it means to be able to afford to live, to study, and to be overseas in the US. These are the costs. Let's look at some of the possibilities. University scholarships will vary from university to university. If you remember, if I said before, typically universities with higher endowments or with more of their own funds will be more able to offer scholarships. Most of these scholarships are going to be merit-based. That is, students who meet certain academic requirements are able to apply for a scholarship at a university, a specific university, to pay for some or all of their costs. Those may be included in your application, or you may need to seek them out separately and submit it along with your application. Those are university to university. There are also some opportunities for programs that will help you pay for it in other ways. You may be able to find international scholarships, that is, scholarships granted by international organizations that can be used anywhere in the world. And you may also be able to take out loans. There are loan programs set up in the United States for people who are, for US citizens that are federally guaranteed. But as an international student, if you're looking for financial aid or loans, you probably would need to do more of the research on your own to find out what programs exist that are specifically for non-US citizens studying in the US. And of course, work study is also very common in the United States, and it's something that's allowable depending on your exact visa. On-campus jobs are the most common opportunities for international students. The type of visa you apply for, the F1 visa, allows for part-time student work on campus during the term, although up to full-time during winter breaks and other longer breaks. Off-campus work, you have to ask for it specifically. It's not guaranteed. However, this is something you want to talk about with your individual university if you identified a place that you really think would be a great fit for you. And it's something that you would be able to talk with someone there about to find out about what possibilities they have for support with payment. I'm going to show you a few examples of some scholarships that I found that show the range of options. The one end, you would have a scholarship. This is a private scholarship called the STAMP Scholarship that's available at a range of universities, such as the University of Minnesota and also William and Mary. Not every university, but it's a single organization that provides this scholarship that's available to international students. This would be a scholarship that would apply, that would give full costs of tuition, full cost of housing, and insurance. It requires a separate application. It requires you to make a written statement and also submit a video essay. This would be something that you would apply for directly through the Stamps Foundation and would then be able to apply it to one of the universities that participates in it. For another example, you could have the International Merit Scholarship, something offered by the University of Memphis. Not a separate application, but for international students who apply and who meet certain requirements, such as the score on the GRE and a high enough GPA, it would cover the international student fees. So not all fees, but it would cover part of them. There's also some large organizations that exist to support students in different ways. For example, the American Association of University Women offers for international students scholarships ranging up to $50,000 for tuition fees. However, they're intended specifically for women who are coming to study in the United States on a non-immigrant visa. That is, it's an organization that exists to encourage women to study abroad and return to their home countries to apply those skills. And there's also another type of scholarship that's common is an assistantship. That's where a university would be taking on doctoral students and offer to pay some or all of their fees, as well as offering, as well as giving payment for their work. For example, the New Haven Provost Assistantship pays 75% of tuition, and it also pays an hourly wage in exchange for different types of research or teaching work. So you can see here, there's a lot of scholarships out there that you have to look for. There's organizations that offer scholarships for specific universities. Some universities have their own scholarships. There's some international organizations that offer, and there's also options, especially at the doctoral level, for students who want to study in abroad and also take on teaching or researching duties. All right. So these are scholarships. This is talking about what you would do when you would get there and how you'd support yourself. But let's also look in more detail about the process of studying. Sorry, the process of the application. So this is a typical example of a full application submission package. First thing I want to point out, there's a lot to it. It's often a long process that secondary school students in the United States will spend months preparing for. Part of it is just getting some documentation together, like showing your GPA by having a copy of your transcript. And I've used them myself. There are services that will translate your transcript into English, and when necessary, also show the how it corresponds to a US GPA system. You want to list extracurricular activities. This is an important part of the application because they're an opportunity for you to demonstrate what helps you stand out, to show who you are as a person, as an individual. It's especially an opportunity for you to show your leadership qualities. Have you taken on the initiative? Have you stepped up? Have you run clubs? Have you conducted projects? Have you done research already? These kind of things are not turn you from just being numbers on a page to a person to be considered by the university as how they would fit into their community and how they would fit into what they're looking for. English proficiency is going to be standard on it, but there's a wide range of ways that you can prove your English proficiency. TOEFL and IELTS are the most common, but I've also seen Duolingo and other types of exams accepted by universities these days. Graduate exams will vary a lot based on the university and the specific school you're applying to. When I applied to graduate school, I took the GRE. That's the most common one, but it's not required by everyone. It's something that you'd be able to take well in advance, so you would know your scores and they would be part of your academic record that you'd submit. Universities will almost always require essays. They typically require personal statements on some theme or idea that's important to you. Like I was saying with extracurriculars, when you're applying to universities in the United States, they're looking to get a sense of who you are as a person, to find out the qualities that help you stand out as a student and as a member of their community. So the answers you give to this are really important. The test scores and the GPA are a big part of it, of course, but these essays that you write are the things that you'll have the most control over and the best opportunity for you to express who you are to the university. Related to that, most universities will also ask for letters of recommendation. And this is just something to support your essays, your grades, to explain, to get someone else's perspective on how you are as a student and as a person. The deadlines will range. If you remember the US academic calendar being different, going from August until June, the deadlines will start as early as November and continue through March or even later on a rolling basis. November is very early. It's something that's often referred to as early action or early decision. That's where universities know that they're going to be accepting people in January, in February, in March, but they want to open up the process earlier to students who are sure about where they want to study and what they want to do. Students will submit an application with the understanding that if they're accepted, then they will take that opportunity. There would not be a chance to, oh, see if I can get in. It's something where you make a decision ahead of time to get accepted. As I said, most deadlines will be by January, March at the latest, but some universities also accept on a rolling basis. That is, as students apply and as they're let in, they're enrolled and they continue taking applications and taking enrollment until they've met their enrollment deadlines. Acceptance rates can range widely, anywhere from the elite universities, the most exclusive private ones, think your Harvard and your Stanfords, can range from 5% or lower, up to universities who focus more on inclusivity and who will accept 50, 60, 70, 80% or more, where their mission is not about keeping people out, but about teaching everyone who is up to their standards and giving them a place in their institution. The last thing that will come in that process will, of course, be your visa application. And your visa application is separate from your university application. Let me say that again. You apply to your university, they will accept you or not, and only after you have an application can you apply for a visa, whichever type it may be. Universities are always have an agreement with the federal government that allows them to grant application to students who, or to grant acceptance, and that acceptance forms the basis of your visa application, but it doesn't guarantee or determine your visa application. That's a separate process altogether. The requirements for a visa, the most common one that you're probably going to be looking at is either the F1 or the J1. The F1 is for students who are enrolled in a full-time educational program. And that's not just in program, like a degree granting program at a university. That is any full-time educational program. It could be language study, or it could be a degree, or it could be something that is approved by the SEVP, the Student and Exchange Visitor Program. And that's the organization that is responsible for determining if the schools can offer the acceptance to qualify for the visa. Some other requirements for the F1 visa: students have to meet a certain level of proficiency in English or be enrolled in English study if they are not. Like I said before, there are ways to study abroad in the United States specifically to study language full-time, but you can also be accepted into a university and then be enrolled in supplemental English language study through that university. These visas, the F, M, and J, are all non-immigrant visas. That means to be accepted and granted permission to enter the country to begin your studies, there's certain qualifications or certain requirements you have to meet. One is that you have to maintain your residence abroad. So you have to have a home back here in Brazil that you will come to and that you'll prove that you'll come to. And you need to show that you have enough funds to support yourself while you're living in the United States. That is something that is just part of the entry. Remember, a visa is just permission to come into the country. Everything after that is unrelated to that. Finally, your visa application will typically end in an interview with a customs or a border or other immigration officer. That's just checking a lot of the information that you've already given, making sure that you meet all the requirements, that you can explain any discrepancies or any confusions. There are some policies that are newer and being changed around. You may be required to disclose your social media accounts. So that's something that you should be prepared for when you get to that stage in the process. One thing I realized I didn't mention, I talked about these full-time educational visas. The F1 is the most common, but there's also the M1 visa, which has essentially all the same requirements. However, it's for students who are enrolled in vocational programs. So think your community college programs, your associate's degrees. You're still there for a full-time study, but it's categorized a little differently. Those are for the full-time educational visas. The other kind of visa that you'll commonly encounter will be the J1 visa. and that's specifically for a short-term educational study. That's a visa for people who are doing a semester or a year abroad, for Fulbright recipients, anyone there on any kind of academic or cultural exchange will be granted the J1 visa. And the specific requirements and documentation for that are going to be all about the individual program that you're applying through, and they'll all have it arranged in their own ways. Those visas are only valid for the duration of the program and 30 days after, which is what distinguishes them from the full-time visas. Okay, so once you have all of your documentation to go through these steps, you'd start off here by the stage you're in now, which is the research and the decision stages. Before you would be beginning your journey, you would start off by thinking about where do you want to study? Are you looking to get a degree, a graduate degree, or a postgraduate study, or finding some way to start a new or complement your existing undergraduate degree? Are you looking to do a short-term exchange, a cultural or research project, or are you coming for language study? That'll determine what kind of visa you're applying for. You need to consider the funding. You need to look carefully at the costs and look at the opportunities for loans, scholarships, or on-campus employment. Again, I'll have some resources to share, but it's important that you do a lot of looking and thinking at this stage. Then you'll be applying first directly to the program you want to study at, and after you're accepted, because I know you will be, you'll be applying for your FM or J visa as required by your program. And once you've submitted that, it's just a matter of preparing for what comes next. So, to recap all of this, after you've researched your options and looked carefully into your requirements, the steps that you're going to want to take now, if you, like I said, you're at the research process here, you're going to be looking specifically at the university or the educational program you want to study at. You want to look at the admission criteria, acceptance rates, documentation, what specific ways they require you to prove your English proficiency, and the deadlines that come up. When you think about funding, you'll want to plan your finances. And that's a matter of not only calculating the costs, but looking for what sources of funding are available when you get there. You'll need to start preparing your documentation. It's never too early to start finding about how you get copies of transcripts, what services you can find to translate and prepare them, and think about who you'll be asking for recommendation letters and what you'll be putting into your personal statements. There are a lot of advisors who are out there to help you. Cynthia, of course, is here for that, but I'd also recommend Education USA, which is the State Department program that is focused entirely on helping students who want to study and learn in the United States. Individual universities will have their own admissions offices and international offices which exist to help you. And there's also independent study abroad programs for guidance on their own programs that they manage. It's important that you stay informed, look out for visa requirements, and keep looking at sessions and webinars like this one. They can change on you quickly. When I came to Brazil last year, I showed up on a tourist, I could show up on a tourist visa for no problem. And now there's a month or more long process I'd have to go through in order to come visit here. They can change quickly, and it's important that you stay aware and are on top of your responsibilities. When you have the information, when you've thought it through, when you have your documents, it's time to make a deadline, look at the deadlines, make a timeline, and start making a plan for how you're going to follow through. So this is the whole process. Obviously, there's a lot more we could talk about this, but I hope this is giving you the background and some of the specific pointers that you can follow up on. I have a list of resources I want to make sure I share with you. I want to stress that Education USA is a great resource. They have a wide range of information, and they exist specifically to help people who are in this area. I'd also recommend the Fulbright. I studied abroad on a Fulbright program. It was an amazing opportunity for me. And there's always opportunities for people who want to research or teach in the United States coming here from Brazil. And of course, the State Department keeps an exhaustive catalog of all kinds of exchange programs. I've listed 2 of them in particular there, but you can always be going through and see what they have to offer, what they recommend, and what they can point you in the direction of. I've also included a couple of independent organizations there, and my email address for those of you who have more detailed or specific conversations. So I will leave this here with the list of resources to share. I'll pause my presentation there, and I think we'll be moving on to answering questions. All right. Let's see. I'm looking here at some questions I've gotten in the chat so far. First one from Davi says, I'm in computer science focusing on cybersecurity. Does having a project already, like continuing my TCC, really help when trying to get a funded master's in the US? I'm not sure exactly what TCC is, but I'll tell you that a master's program in the United States, it's going to be very specific to the individual university. When you're looking at getting a funded program, postdoctorate PhD programs are more likely to have that kind of fully funded offerings. For a master's program, you're more likely to be looking not at the, you're more likely to look into scholarships and financial aid, and especially international student scholarships. So I would say, I don't think having a project it would be an important part of your application process. Definitely talk with the university, and when you're writing your personal statements and explaining your motivations and your goals, that will be a big part of it. But in terms of funding, I think you would be looking more at looking for scholarships at a master level is more common. Okay, next, a great question, Tainata, asking about applying for a master's degree given the current political situation. Like I mentioned, the thing to keep in mind is it's very flexible. It's always changing a lot. That being said, the SEV program does apply, is controlled by the federal government, and they're the ones who determine who is allowed to get visas and who studies in the United States. So the best advice I can give you is to stay on top of the news, to pay attention to the how the political situation might impact your course of studies. But is it worth applying? Absolutely. I mean, there's certainly something that could really be a great opportunity for you, and you won't even know until you follow up on it. Yeah, there's not a clear answer there just because things are changing and they will keep changing. So keep yourself informed, and definitely don't be afraid. Don't choose to not follow through on opportunities because you don't know what's going to happen. It's always worth looking and finding out what's best for you. Okay, next one, also from Davi, about studying in the US, how it can help you stay and work after graduation. Getting an immigrant visa is very different from a student visa. As a general rule, when your student visa expires, you don't have automatic permission to stay and live in the United States and work even part-time. What it can do is it can really help you with networking and developing your skills. There's always the possibility of having work visas granted through employers based on skills and need. And studying in the United States can not only help you develop those skills, but it can help you meet universities and make contacts and find out how you could make yourself a candidate for that kind of visa. So it could definitely help, but I do want to point out those are very different. The student visa and the work visa are not related. They're two separate two courses you would follow. Okay, next I have a question about the F1 visa and financial aid. Yes, does having an F1 visa for financial aid? It does not. An F1 visa is what you would need before you could even study at the university. Like I mentioned before, with financial aid, it's for foreign students coming to the United States, your financial aid will probably come in the form of a separate scholarship program. Private universities especially will have their own, but other universities, private and public, may have their own scholarship programs. So it does not prevent you in any way. In fact, it's necessary to have an F visa in order to study in the United States, and you'll need to be accepted by a university to be eligible to apply for scholarships from that university. It's different when you're talking about getting scholarships from outside organizations, but there's not one rule for that. Each independent organization will have their own process for how they determine scholarships for studying in the United States, and you would work it out with them one at a time. Okay, next from Vinicius, we have any tips about visa application? So like I was sharing for the visa application, the most important thing is to get all of your documents in order. It can be, in my own experience, applying for visas, the process can be very paperwork intensive and also very long, very time consuming. It could be a case of you need to get everything assembled and shipped to a visa processing center in Texas, and then you might have to wait 2 to 3 months before you even get a notification that it's been received. That's just one example, but the point is that paperwork can take a long time, and the last thing you want is to realize that you forgot a certificate of translation or you didn't include your GPA, and to have to submit other parts of it can really slow down the process. Best advice, check the requirements carefully and triple check your paperwork. Before you put anything in the mail, you want to make sure you know exactly what they need, what you're sending, and where it's going, because yeah, that can take much longer than you would think. Okay, next question from Georgia about internships. So how internships work is you work directly, in theory, when you do an internship, like a business internship, you go directly with a business that hires you as an intern and arranges your J visa and provides you with training with regards to the rules. However, what I suggest is more common is you would be looking at an organization that does study abroad programs. You're probably not going to reach directly to a company and ask them for an internship. You're probably going to work with someone who takes the role of a recruiter. They advertise their services to international students, and they specialize in connecting international students with businesses in the United States who run internship programs. I have less experience with that, but I could tell you could look into institutions such as CIEE. That's an international cultural exchange organization, and that's in the list of resources that I'll share. But your best bet, if you're interested in an internship, is to find some organization that specializes in it and talk with them directly rather than try and do it all yourself. Okay. I think we've reached the end of the questions. Is that right? Yes. Okay. So you have, I'll share again. I want to make sure this is shared with the participants. Some resources that I want to point you towards, and also my email address there, dchavez06@gmail.com for more specific follow-up questions. If I can't answer them, I'm happy to put you in touch with people who will. I'm here. My role here as an English teacher, as an English language fellow, is sponsored by the embassy in Brazil, and they have a lot of resources and a lot of specialists in this area that I'd be happy to put you in touch with. Okay. So I think that's all that I have. That's all we have for the questions. So this will bring us to the end of the presentation. I'm not sure if we'll have Fernanda or Carol to wrap up. No? Okay, if not, then we'll stop there. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I hope this has been helpful to you, and I hope that the resources will also give you some more things to follow up on, to think about, to look into, and that you can reach out to me directly with any further questions or follow-up. But that's all. Thank you so much for attending, and have a great day and great rest of the weekend.